First off, I apologize for being absent for a while. I've been on other projects, but I'm going to go ahead and start uploading again. The title of this video is actually misleading because we're not going to call this the Backdoor 2-5 actually. Because in truth, that's just a more complex way of saying the borrowed minor 4 and flat 7 chord. And when you tell somebody the Backdoor 2-5 as a beginner, that you're going to completely confuse them if you use that terminology. They're going to look for a 2 and a 5. I've had this happen with students. We're also going to use it in a non-jazzy way, maybe for dramatic music. So the Backdoor 2-5, okay, let's just use basic triads. They'll usually tell you it's this minor 4 in some form, and then the flat 7 chord, which would be B flat. Now this is actually technically a 2-5 move in a different key. If we revolve this move around the C, we don't really see a 2 or a 5. So the term is misleading. But if you look at it closely, it is actually a 2 and a 5 in parallel minors relative major, which would be E flat. Now there's a 2-5-1 move. So in other words, we're just borrowing from parallel minor. So that's actually the easiest definition you can give. We're borrowing from parallel minor. So technically this is just a borrowing concept, if you think about it. And you could add some, extensions and whatnots and sevenths. Still the same move, it's still borrowing technically. So there you go, there's an easier explanation for the same thing. Think of it always as some form of the minor 4 chord and the minor 7 chord, okay? And that's the 2-5 of E flat. Parallel minor is relative major. So let's take a G chord and find its Backdoor 2-5. Well, if you'd use parallel minor borrowing techniques, it's going to be the 4 chord and then the flat 7. You could use 7th chords or whatever. It doesn't really matter. So let's go ahead and use this now. Now that we know that it's just a borrowed chord. And we'll use some form of melodic minor, maybe Mixolydian flat 6. Maybe we'll start on the E flat, okay? So, and do a beginning move like that. Now there's the Backdoor 2-5 to the G. In other words, the borrowed parallel minor 4-7-1. Technically, we could say Lydian augmented because we're starting on the E flat, but it does sound like we're revolving around the G. So let me go ahead and start something and use that move. That sounds nothing like jazz. It sounds like that's our center. So we're going to go ahead and say Mixolydian flat 6. So if you're using this scale, if you leave the 5th out, it actually gives you a really nice transition. We'll put that augmented interval in later just to show that it can work too. So let's create a harmonic scheme and I'll write this out for you. E flat major 7th without the 5th, or it'd be augmented without the 5th. G, Backdoor 2-5, which I'm considering the parallel minor borrowed 4 flat 7. Now let's use this as a pivot point to B flat. Now we'll have to work our way back. And this is where functional harmony comes in really handy. 5 of 5, if G's our tonal center, now 5 chord. So now you can do a little trick to get back to that E flat kind of tonality. Since we're considering this the 5 chord, we could actually use the deceptive cadence concept and go to that E flat tonality. That's implied E flat because we left the 5th out, remember? So this whole scheme is a little obscure, but we're still using moves that we might already know to get back to our main riff. So I'll write out this basic scheme and put it up here for you. Now I may not improvise on these chords exactly as they're written here, bear that in mind, but I'm still using the same kind of bass chords. This will create a very obscure harmonic scheme that does not sound anything like jazz, especially if I approach it in a certain way. And so again, our return to that E flat beginning is using the same concept. If I'm in G minor, there's your dominant deceptive cadence. And creating that deceptive cadence as if we're returning to Melodic in flat 6. So let's start. Now we've got a piece of music that we could at least start working with, and we could repeat that phrase now. So now we've used this move in a non-jazzy sounding way. Let me add the augmented interval to the E flat major 7th sound right there. Maybe I'll use that as an ending. The backdoor. So you can use that augmented interval. I'd probably use it more in a motion way like that. It kind of masks it. So let's do that really slow. The E flat major 7th sound. Now that you have that augmented interval, I masked it with a little bit of motion. Backdoor 2-5 or borrowed parallel minor, whatever you want to say. We could use that dominant 9th sound on the F chord. So this would sound like a really nice ending to something. Or you can do a little bit more motion, I don't know. So the whole point really here is that it's really just borrowing, and we're now using it to borrow from an obscure mode like Melodic in flat 6.